Hey there, my name is Kevin Duskett, president of Prime Rogue Inc. In this episode of Rogue Insights, we're going to discuss why contemporary, ordinary Germans, quote unquote, should not and cannot offer legitimate and reliable advice about the Holocaust and Nazism. So when I was a grad student, my first year, there was this really cool German kid who was an exchange student, and we were preparing for our methods sequence, which involves heavy math use, and we were doing some math problems, practicing them in my apartment after school, prior to the start of the quarter, and he found out that we were going to be meeting a guy with a certain name that I won't repeat, but it was a very obvious Jewish-sounding name, and he goes to me, Kevin, I've never met a Jew before. What do I do? I'm like, what? What do you mean? And he went into this long, earnest conversation about, German war guilt and how he was wondering whether he should apologize to the guy for the Holocaust. And I was like, no, I don't think that's socially expected. And I explained why. And it was a good conversation. It was interesting to find out about this concept that's pretty big in Germany. I might butcher this word even though I took 3 years of German. It's Vergangenheitsbewältigung. It's basically like the German term about coming to terms with the past, what the Germans did across 2 world wars and a Holocaust. Yesterday, I had an encounter with another very ordinary German, pertaining to a project that myself and an artist are working on. Without going into detail, involves a depiction of soldiers from every country that participated in World War II in a certain form. And the artist and I made the very conscious choice prior to initiation that we wouldn't be depicting Nazi symbols like the swastika, the Totenkopf, the German eagle, etc. Rather, in line with the, shall we say, more humorous nature of the images, we'd be doing little doodles. They might look something like it, but they wouldn't be them, because we didn't want to give these symbols credibility. And this person, probably not even close to the smartest bulb in the batch, so to speak, vociferously and vitriolically ripped into this artist about using a swastika. And then the artist had to be like, well, there is no swastika. And what was this ordinary German's response? It was basically, F you anyway. You're an idiot. And then, oddly enough, this being the online world of Twitter or X, another German, a person of German descent, or partial German descent as far as I know, who should know better considering they work for an Ivy League university, piled in on it and started using some ostensible moral high ground about good satire to try to create a narrative of guilt around the artist. And it was all very disgusting, and it led me to think about this friend in grad school and how he had an earnest response to this German concept of overcoming the past, of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, I think. But that what I was seeing now wasn't that. It was weaponized virtue signaling. So this is why I want to explain to you why contemporary Germans should say nothing or attempt to teach no lessons about the Holocaust and Nazism. So let's go back in time to the German Empire from about 1871 to 1918. Bismarck, all that good stuff. German society was highly militaristic, and there was this strict hierarchy that became deeply ingrained into German society. Citizens were expected to basically follow orders from the government, whether or not they were in the military, just like that, no questioning. And this is something that carried into both world wars, between the world wars, and which I would argue carries into society today. In fact, there are German words that are used to reflect this. Ordnung und Pflicht. Essentially, these are words basically surrounding the notions of order and duty and how they're very prominent in German culture. And if we look at how these work, we look at World War I. Germans happily followed the mob mentality and went to war. During the Weimar Republic, which followed World War One, where we saw a high degree of continuity in German foreign policy between World War One and the Holocaust, we saw how instability, something we're also seeing today in relation to populism, led ordinary Germans to seek out and follow strong leaders like Adolf Hitler, which shows a very consistent and strong pattern in German culture for, cultish leadership. And I mean, this was epitomized in Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler, where this Führerprinzip, the leader principle, it demanded absolute loyalty to Hitler. And so many Germans complied without questioning during the Holocaust by bullets in Ukraine, beyond that. And we have so many social psychological principles to talk about this. Milgram's obedience experiments, where he basically had people shocking an imaginary person on the other side of a wall, even though they knew the doses of the shock they were administering were lethal. We have the Ash conformity experiments, where basically he had 6 actors, or maybe 7, and a regular participant, and they had to look at lines and say if the lines are the same length. Well, all the actors would say one thing, and more often than not, the real participant would agree with the actors even though they were wrong, just because he wanted to show conformity. So there's a natural predisposition to this type of conformity, but I'd argue that it's very much greater in the history of the German people. And let's contextualize this to understand yesterday's encounter, this guy I knew in graduate school, and why Germans shouldn't be talking about the Holocaust. Why they have nothing to tell the world, and probably never will. So it's not fair for a contemporary German kid to feel guilt about the Holocaust. That in and of itself is absurd. And I've heard this argument made, oh my god, we still feel guilty about the Holocaust. Well, you didn't do it. So what you should be doing, in my opinion, is not perpetrating or perpetuating the exact same cultural schemas that led your country to do this in the first place. And this led to what's called Vergangenheitsbewältigung, I believe. Essentially almost a government-sponsored program to come to terms with the past, to deal with guilt, and to make amends, so to speak, to the world. So in the post-war period, we've seen this significant weight of collective guilt on ordinary Germans. And I'm using the word ordinary Germans on purpose, and you'll see why in a minute. But the persistence and salience of this concept of collective guilt in German culture has kind of made it difficult, if not impossible, for Germans to view what their grandfathers and great-grandfathers did during the Holocaust without a degree of emotionality that a detached observer from the West might be able to have. Mind you, I'm not Jewish, but I'm certainly a Slav. I'm probably a deviant, so the Nazis killed some of my people. So, I mean, am I as well placed to talk about the Holocaust as a Jew? No. But I'm far better situated than a German, any ordinary German. What I was thinking about when this happened, with this incident, with this online troll, this low intelligence person, is that when you combine this form of collective guilt and this, again, concept of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, which I'm probably butchering because it's one of those crazy long German words they invent to, well, I enjoy that. With woke culture, what you're getting is virtue signaling. What you're getting is a context in which this quote-unquote apparent German liberalism and free thinking is not free thinking at all. It's a reflection of the very same mob mentality that led the German people to participate in these atrocities in the first place. And when we think about this poses dangers for German society as a whole, as it pertains to returning to the eras of the past and once again becoming a threat to Europe and the world, and to global discourse about the Holocaust and Nazism at a time where the Israeli state, the Jewish state, which is strongly supported by Germany, as I'll soon discuss, is engaging in atrocities in Gaza and other areas of the Middle East. And I want to draw on some scholarly work to kind of, I guess, situate this for you. And the reason I've been using the term ordinary Germans is goes back to Hannah Arendt's work in The Banality of Evil, which was an analysis of the Adolf Eichmann trial. What came through to Arendt in this trial is that Eichmann, he came off as a banal, ordinary person. He was committing genocide through bureaucracy. He wasn't inherently monstrous. He was an ordinary German who was simply following the orders of the German government under the Pflicht. And if we remember back to the work of the German sociologist Max Weber, we also know that the Germans essentially invented bureaucracy. So when we combine these facts, this entrenchment of bureaucracy with the Führerprinzip, and with these focuses on Ordnung and Pflicht, order and duty in German culture, we see how dangerous of a cultural schema has been created and how non-credible this cultural schema is in relation to commenting the Holocaust. Now, we have to recognize that individual responsibility versus collective responsibility is a very complicated topic. And as I said earlier, there's no reason for a newborn German fresh out of the womb to feel any guilt for what was done during the Holocaust. In fact, the notion of that, like my friend back in graduate school, is absolutely absurd to me. But at the same time, there is cultural memory, and it's a real phenomenon. And through this attempt to overcome their collective guilt, the Germans have been trying to construct a new identity, kind of repudiating the Nazi past. So, when it comes to Holocaust-related symbols, you get Germans getting a little defensive, even though historical depictions in film, in history books, would clearly imply that these need to be used so that we can recognize exactly what signs to look for, kind of like we're seeing with the resurgence of populism in contemporary Europe, as it pertains to avoiding this happening again. But if Germans are essentially attempting to cut off discourse at the legs by basically saying, "Oh my God, you can't use that symbol. We have laws against it." Laws against it. Well, are these laws designed to actually... What are they designed to do? Because it sure as hell looks to me that those laws are there for PR. I feel, honestly, that Germans are some of the hideously most uninformed people regarding their own history and what was actually done and the reasons for it. If we look at Daniel Jona Goldhagen's Hitler's Willing Executioners, he looks at this military unit that was put together and that basically engaged in the killings of thousands with machine guns. And like with Arendt's work on Eichmann, he suggests that these ordinary Germans, mobilized by these deeply ingrained anti-Semitic beliefs, which were tropes throughout Europe at the time, basically followed what was a natural and national predisposition towards genocide, based on, first, hatred of the Jews, and second, a cultural schema of conformity. The very same cultural schema of conformity regarding overcoming historical memory, historical guilt that we see today. So, if this is the case, if this German focus on attempting to repudiate or overcome the past is really one on ignoring the past, it's actually one that reaffirms the past. It actually points to a context in which a contemporary German telling you, you can't use that symbol, or you can't talk about that in relation to their past, is actually engaging in a fascist act. And anyone who's supporting that point of view is also acting as a fascist. Because that is what fascism is about. It's about the control of the other. And we look at contemporary German culture, and we do see the enduring influence of Ordnung and Pflicht, order and duty. German society is rather procedural and rigid in terms of context, high context versus low context cultures. And we look at the German legal system, the educational system, the gymnasium system, the bureaucracy. We still see a culture of compliance and authority of the very same type that we saw in the German Empire, then led into World War I, and then led into World War II, and then led into the Holocaust, All the while, we're seeing the overcoming of historical guilt being conflated with woke culture in a manner that's creating this new German, I would call it fascism. You want a good example of it? Compare Germany's Ukrainian policy to its Israeli policy. Because of its German World War II guilt, it provides immense billions of dollars of aid and weapons to Israel every year, from advanced submarines to missile systems. And what are these used for? Predominantly to kill people who throw rocks and shoot with machine guns. This asymmetrical war between the Israelis and the Gazans, or the Palestinians. In contrast, when it came to provide aid to Ukraine to fight the massive Russian invasion that happened in 2022, Germany was a country that it was just like, oh, we're neutral. We don't want to get involved. So there's no value proposition here. Germans don't defend values. They defend their appearance. That's why we've seen such significant aid given to Israel over the years, but why we've seen virtually no support towards Ukraine, even though Ukraine, Austria, Poland, pretty close. You think where do you think the greater geopolitical threat is? And also, this is happening in the context of rising populism. Viktor Orban in Hungary, Donald Trump in the United States, all these strongman leaders, the exact types of leaders Germans were so vulnerable to leading up to World War II. I'd actually make the argument that Germans are not only, I suppose, the least authoritative people to speak of Nazism and the Holocaust, but they're also at a very significant risk of once again being manipulated and engaging in large-scale political violence of the type that we saw during the Holocaust. Let's just look at German public opinion today. Germany has a massive Turkish population. It's its largest ethnic minority. There's almost this form of domestic apartheid going on against the Turks, with mass racism and xenophobia, clear and direct discrimination in employment, education, social acceptance, massive scapegoating. As this is going on, we have these far-right movements that are resurging in Germany. AfD, Alternative for Germany, has been growing in popularity over the years. Germans are kind of showing this resurgence of xenophobic nationalism that was so ubiquitous in the past. And this is exactly the thing that first undermines any notion that a German is credible in talking about the Holocaust or Nazism, but also points to the risk that the same type of ordinary Germans that are discussed by Arendt in relation to Eichmann are once again potentially a threat to the world at large. We look at the EU, which we see as this mechanism of civilization that's tying Europe together and expanding. The EU was largely created, and Germany was integrated into it. And I say this as someone who used to teach the politics of the European Union at the university level, because there were fears that Germany would once again attack the rest of Europe. So the idea was, let's make Germany dependent on the rest of Europe, and let's give Germany a leadership role so it's not going to act out again. But when I see ordinary Germans like the idiot I was speaking to yesterday, and the idiot German-American Ivy Leaguer who defended this person immediately, I'm struck by how this combination of woke culture and this attempt to overcome the past is leading to the exact same types of patterned neo-fascist control that we saw in the Weimar Republic. When we look at Germany today, how Germany treats the Turks, how Germany blindly supports Israel, and how Germans are so moralizing regarding what their forefathers did during the Holocaust. And when we take the concept of, apologies for this butchering, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, overcoming the past or coming to terms with the past, with woke culture, it becomes clear that Germans speaking about the Holocaust and Nazism are engaged in nothing more than reputation management. When we combine that with the fact that these very, very same Germans are showing these significant anti-Turkish tendencies, and we consider the ubiquity of xenophobia in contemporary Germany, all the while Ordnung und Pflicht, order and duty, still persist. All the while we have populist fascist parties rising in Germany. I would argue that these same ordinary Germans who are attempting to tell us how we should talk about the Holocaust are a threat to Europe today and in the near future. This has been Rogue Insights from Prime Rogue Inc. Signing off.